going to talk about a block and tackle. I think I said in the previous segment we'd look at 3-to-1s, but I want to do the block and tackle first, and then we'll come back to that. To me, this is a block and tackle. Some might consider this to be a block and tackle also. But to me, this is what epitomizes the block and tackle system. It's blocks of sheaves inside single housing that have independent sheaves that can help us do things. This is reminiscent of the blocks that they used to use on the sailing ships. They were either blocks with sheaves in them, wooden blocks literally, and that was the block. And the tackle, block and tackle, was the rope that ran through it. In broader sense, perhaps maybe any block and tackle constitutes a block and tackle, but not to me. In case you're not familiar with these things, this is basically a single pulley, or it's a single housing that has two sheaves in it. So it's like a double pulley, and they can have more than that in it. Each roller or sheave can travel independent of the other, and you can see that that'd have to be true because this rope is moving faster than this rope, so they have to move at different speeds in order not to have rope dragging through them. So we'll determine very quickly that there are a lot of similarities here, or just accept that there are. And I want to next evaluate, we'll apply our test for a simple pulley system to a block and tackle and see if it meets the requirements for a simple pulley system. So if I pull it up, all the moving pulleys, and here's a moving pulley, move toward the anchor. That's requirement number one. Number two is that all the pulleys that move have to move at the same rate of speed toward the anchor. Well, since we have basically a dual pulley here, and they're in one housing, they do indeed have to move toward the anchor at the same speed. So it is a simple pulley system. We now know from our look at this that once we determine we have a simple pulley system, we can calculate the mechanical advantage by simply counting the lines that support the load. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, let me emphasize this because this will trip you up sometimes. This line counting thing, the ones that support the load, only works in simple pulley systems. You can't use that method in compound and complex pulley systems. So we have to know it's a simple system, and it is. So if I pull here, for every pound of force I put in here, I'm going to have 4 pounds here because I have 4 lines here. So my gain, mechanical advantage, if you want to call it, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-to-1. Every pound gives me 4 here. A block and tackle is unique in another way too. It's just so concise and compact. It has one connection point at the anchor, and yet we've got 2 pulleys connected. It has one connection point at the load, and yet we've got 2 pulleys connected there. Plus, you can wrap this, and I'm not going to do the full tight wrap. Fold this thing up, pack it in a bag, and it'll stay just like that. When you get ready to use it, you take it out, unfold it, and unwrap it, and it's ready to go. Now, I think if you look at this, being a 4-to-1 and a 4-to-1, that's probably not going to work very well with this, and it ties up a lot of gear. So a block and tackle has a lot of interesting advantages to it. Simple pulley systems, because of the way they're configured, usually, if not always, can be flipped. So I'm going to do that right now. And we don't create something all that new. No, it's all right. I was going to turn it around, but I won't. But it does add a factor of mechanical advantage. And the reason it does, let's look at it. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines supporting the load. So we now have a 5-to-1. Just flipping this thing around, we now have a 5-to-1. An interesting thing happens at the load. Let's calculate what the force at the load is. I think it's going to be a surprise. Let's do that with 100 pounds. Let's just assume we've got 100 pounds here, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines supporting a load in a simple pulley system, so we have 20 pounds in each line. Well, let's look at that. What do we have right here? It is the sum of all the loads in the lines. They add up to create the force here. So we've got 20, 40, 60, 80. We have 80 pounds right here. So there's only 80 pounds pulling down on that from a 100-pound load. Well, does that make sense? How could you have something lighter here than you have here? Well, the answer is I've got 20 of it right here. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. So I've got 20 pounds of upward force right here in addition to the 80 pounds right here. So 80 plus 20 equals the load. It's kind of a trick, but that's the way it is. And if you'll recall, it's not maybe that strange, when we had a simple pulley system with one pulley and it anchored here and we pulled here, we found the load on the anchor was half the weight of the load because I had the other half. So the two halves added. So maybe not such a surprise after all. In the next segment, I'm going to drop back to the 3-to-1 systems. We're going to look at just a pulley 3-to-1, rope and pulley, and we're going to look at a block and tackle 3-to-1, and we're going to look at a Z-rig. Z-rig is a pretty interesting pulley configuration. You can probably do some similar things with ordinary pulley systems, but the Z-rig offers some interesting advantages.